We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vallotton. Dad, thanks so much for coming on this week. It's always good to be on here. I wanted to take some time and just ask you some questions about life. So this podcast is going to be like advice from Dad. We're going to hear some of your stories, some of your successes, some of your failures, some of the things that you wish you could have done different, done better, that kind of stuff. I get to ask you whatever questions I want, but a lot of people don't. So I thought that would be kind of fun for everyone.
That'd be good.
Yeah. Starting off right off the bat, I would love to know what you think your biggest failure was and why.
I've had a lot of them. Probably the most, the most prominent failure as far as having a long-term impact on our family would have been, the growing our business in a way that was inconsistent with good business practice as far as outgrowing our finances and borrowing money, and then making bad business decisions based on ambition instead of on wisdom. And then, ultimately we sold our businesses and lost them. So I'd say, as far as, a big thing that affected, like we lost our house and everything except for our 2 cars and our furniture, that was the thing that happened that was the worst. And I would say that, that was really based on not listening to the people that I actually put in around me. And it's why I have such a huge passion now for accountability. It's not that I didn't have it before, but I just didn't listen. And that created a scenario that, that ultimately failed and created, 4 or 5 years of financial pain. And, that's
because we had a parts store, right? We had
one auto parts store.
One auto parts store. And did you have cool air at that time as well?
Yeah, we had air conditioning and we had we did. We had one auto parts store and had an air conditioning business, and those were very successful and doing really well. And then the challenge was that I was really bored because basically my managers ran everything. And then I just started, I've said, people ask like, well, let me say this. My motto is don't make decisions when you're tired, bored, or, feeling insecure, because you make those out of the wrong core values, and they have long-term consequences.
Yeah.
So that had a long-term consequence, and the Lord really was kind and delivered us, but it was about a 3.5, 4-year process to, after losing everything, to start all over again. And so after 20 years of, building a pretty beautiful business, it all came down in 1 year, and it was devastating. And I mean, I've made other mistakes. I mean, I look at the way we raise kids, and, we loved our kids, and our house was always a great home to live in. But, there are things that you learn later on in life that you're like, oh, I would have done that differently. And, I could have been way more patient. I'd say impatience and boredom have been my 2 strongest. I'd say those are the 2 things that probably plague me the most in my everyday life, is just, boredom and impatience. And probably they're probably somehow related.
brother and sister.
Yeah. When I get impatient, I'm like, I'm telling myself, don't make a big decision right now,
So in business, because you ran businesses. I mean, you've been in business since you were 20 years old.
Yeah.
Biggest mistake would be making a poor decision out of being bored, not listening to the friends around you going, hey, I don't think that's a great idea.
Yeah. And borrowing, and the way I did it. So it's like the way I did it was I borrowed 300,000. And, the truth is that we had pretty much built our businesses. We'd bootstrapped our businesses. So we maybe borrowed 10 grand here or there for something short, but mostly we just paid cash as we went. And then we went from that to borrowing $300,000. And then, you got a note, plus you have to make, so not only do you have to pay the note back, but then our business plan crumbled really quickly for some things that we didn't have control of, which is a part of the world, right? You don't control, you don't even have total control of you, much less the elements around you. And so our business plan worked really good for about 8 months till our competitors saw what we were doing, and they had a lot more capital and they had a lot more influence in the new city we were in. And they just basically sold the very same parts we had for cost, and we couldn't compete. So it was just a bad business decision.
So you're in business, you make some bad decisions, you get smashed. How do you get out of that? What's the advice to these young guys that you're talking to that's like, okay, now you're down, how do you get up?
Well, here's the deal. So what happened, I'll give you the very short version. So we actually borrowed the 300,000 from our supplier, who was the second largest supplier of auto parts, aftermarket auto parts in the United States. And then when those businesses, 2 of our 3 part stores, well, especially one part store was bleeding, hemorrhaging money, we went to them and said, hey, we're going to close these 2 auto parts stores and just keep our real profitable one. And they said, hey, we'll buy all 3 of them from you. And, basically you're going to come out with that $250,000. And because we were moving to Bethel anyway, I thought, well, that's a great plan. Let's do that. And so we entered into an agreement with them, which was supposed to be like a 3 or 4 month escrow. And it turned into an 18-month escrow, so that from the time we engaged in the contract to the time that we moved, so we thought that the sale would be done, and then we'd have about another 10 months to navigate going to Bethel with $250,000. But instead what happened is we moved to Bethel because the escrow kept going, and we were at Bethel about a month, and then we called for a part and their phone was disconnected. So, and then the short story is they went bankrupt. And so they went bankrupt with us owing them the 300,000 plus money for parts, plus we didn't have the 250. And basically we ended up owing 1.8 million. We probably owed over 2 million really, but we owed at least 1.8 million. And, the only way out was, we were making nothing at Bethel, $1,000. I made $1,000 a month, and your mom made $1,000 a month. So we were living in a little apartment. So basically, there's no way we're going to pay back $2 million on our wage. We were basically making groceries. And so we were going to go bankrupt. And then we told, the elders at Bethel that we were leaving, going back into business. Because, how are we going to make a living? It definitely was going to be anyway. So we went to see the elders of our church and told them we were leaving. We owed 127 suppliers, 1.8 million. And one of the elders stood up and said, hey, we're going to pray for you and God's going to do a miracle. Would you trust me? And I said, well, I don't have any faith for that. And he said, would you trust my faith? I'm like, okay. So we did that, and we didn't go back. He said, would you not go bankrupt for 6 months? And we agreed to that. I mean, what's 6 months? And although we had already seen a bankruptcy attorney and everything. And then what happened within, I think, a couple months, maybe 3 months, within 3 months, we'll say, half of the 1.8 million was forgiven. And so now my faith is building. And so, and then I'll keep shortening these stories. It took us 3 years, but within 3 years of the time we closed our business, lost our business, we had everything paid off or forgiven. And so then it took us a couple more years, obviously, to rebuild, right? Because we were living in a little apartment and we have no money. I mean, we have debts paid off, but we have no money and we have to start all over. And so, yeah, that's kind of our journey. That was our journey.
How do you feel like that experience has shaped you coming in and helping to lead Bethel and the environment and, grow? Because Bethel has I can't remember, what our yearly salary is, but a fairly large.
72 million.
Yeah, 72 million, 700 employees.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of the stuff that you learned in business through those years really helped prepare you to lead Bethel.
Yeah, it was the worst thing that ever happened in my life as far as business. And it was the best thing that ever happened in my life as far as wisdom. And, that level of pain you don't ever forget. And so, what I see a lot of people do is they blame it on other people. For example, we did really get deceived by our supplier, and they lied about their condition, and they are the ones that ultimately forced us into closure. So ultimately, I could say, well, it wasn't my fault. It was their fault, But you don't learn anything when you blame other people. And it is true that had they have kept their deal, we would have walked away with $250,000 for our 20 years of hard labor.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were all kinds of signs that there was something huge wrong with their company. And but what I learned is you choose to believe what you want to believe instead of believe what the signs tell you. And so, I think that, yeah. And then, building from debt was a killer because, there was no way, like we owed so much more debt than we were worth that there was no fixing it. So so when I came to Bethel, our total income for the year I came was 1.8 million. That's Bethel Church's total income. That includes missions. I mean, everything, every penny that we had. And all of that money came from tithes and offerings. Like out of the 1.8, like 1.7, it was like 50,000 besides tithes and offerings. And so, and then Bethel was in trouble financially too when we got here, which I was told that things are a little tight, but I didn't understand that they were in trouble. And so, when I came on staff, we lost our business within a month or two, and we're trying to recover, okay, I have all these suppliers, and then Bethel couldn't pay its employees. So, and they were like 120 days behind on their bills. So I was like, oh my gosh, I jumped out of the pot and into the fire. But what was really cool is, and I didn't catch it for a while, is that I basically took over the leadership of we had a CFO who is a great guy, but I basically took over leadership of the finances of the church. And what I was mirroring, like my recovery, my personal recovery, I was mirroring with the church. And the onset of that was that I figured out that we had to have other income at Bethel because living on tithes and offerings was not going to pay our bills. And so I began with the team, of course, lots of credit to the team. We began to build, other sources of income, school ministry, the bookstore, eventually the next year, Bethel Media, which was called Sound Wisdom at the time. And, it took us about 3 years for Bethel. So while I was recovering, it's kind of crazy, but Bethel was recovering on the same timeline. And when we got to about 3 years, all my debts were paid off. And the crazy thing is, when we got to 3 years, Bethel was on time and had a little bit of money in the bank and was paying all of its bills. And so, we were just mirroring what I was learning in my recovery. We were just mirroring that with Bethel. And then, every year, including the COVID year, We've grown every year since COVID. I should say that's not true. The COVID year we were down because we didn't have events, so we were off like $10 million. But every year since before then and since then, we've grown every year, and so that's been exciting and also really encouraging. To fail in an area and then go back and succeed in the area that you failed in. And I don't want to say this as a cliche, like it was all the Lord in that, he would say, don't do that, do this, make that investment, don't do that. And of course, after you fail, you have a more listening ear. So you're like, okay, you're double checking, like, am I really supposed to do that? Is this the best thing? And yeah. So, and then Bill Johnson he's just such a wonderful person. So, I really got the opportunity to have a lot of freedom to help us grow in a way that was healthy here.
It, man, that must have been such a crazy time for you. Must have taken so much courage after going through the failure in your business. And on one hand, like you're watching God do some miracles, but at the same time, like you're trying to grow this other world, Bethel, having had your confidence just so smashed.
I have to say that most of those days weren't courage, Jay. They were desperation. And I know there's a big difference. Like if somebody attacks your family, and you're just responding out of complete desperation to protect your family, and at the end of the day, you happen to apprehend that potential murderer, and when it's all over, your heart's beating 1,000 miles an hour, and you're like, oh, that was so courageous. And you're like, there wasn't a moment of courage in there. It was like, I didn't have a choice. I was desperate. And so I feel like my situation, especially our personal situation, was so desperate that I had no choice but to have to do the right thing. And then Bethel's was more just a mirroring. Okay, so obviously we need more revenue. So what are we going to do about that? And, and I felt like Bethel was in a desperate situation also. So it didn't, I don't want to play, like I've done some courageous things in my life. I bet pretty much everybody has that's been my age.
Yeah.
But that was more desperation, wisdom, learning from your mistakes, and listening to the Lord, really honestly. Yeah. And to mentors.
I get it. And I think that we like to think back on ourselves as courageous, but when you're drowning, the only thing left to do is to try and swim, right? Like, oh, you're so brave, you swam. Well, the only other option was to drown. So
yeah, exactly. That's
it wasn't like I said, hey, I'll go swim that water because I want to. I'm in over my head. Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit. When it comes to your greatest success, what do you feel like your greatest success has been?
Well, my children loving me and my grandchildren loving me. And, 3 of my grandchildren have been to the school that their grandfather helped to build and lead. And my own son, you, have been to the school that I helped to build and lead. And, Jesus said a prophet has honor except for his hometown. And that is not true of my family. And so my family believe in me to the place where they have actually want to be in my life and trust me and ask for advice and want to be where their papa teaches every week is easily my biggest success in life. My second biggest success and my marriage, I have a great, this, Jay, but I have the most wonderful woman that you could ever think of. I mean, we've had never a bad day in our marriage. And I say that 100%. Like, we've had bad days being married, like this stuff we just talked about, but with each other, we've never had a bad day in our marriage. And that's the truth before God. We've had a bad hour. We've had a bad 3 or 4 hours. We've never had a bad day. And that's obviously a great success for me and for Kathy. And then, the greatest thing I've ever created, like a thing that I've ever done, is definitely the School of Ministry. And again, I want to be careful because nobody does anything amazing by themselves. And so, I got to be the, co-leader with Bill and the main builder. But there was lots of people around making it happen. And, you can envision building a great bridge, but if you don't have contractors and, construction workers and, people that can operate heavy equipment, you can't build anything. Yeah. So I'd say that's my greatest accomplishment with the team.
Dad, what do you attribute those successes to?
Well, if you ask me, what is your greatest positive attribute? I would say, I don't quit, which is also why I get in trouble, right? Because I don't quit. Like you don't want to be on the wrong side of me if I, you know what I'm like, I don't quit. Jay, you know this. Like
I do.
When I finally quit, it's because I see no way forward. Like, and every other human would have quit like back there.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is in me that I'll say it's like an attribute that's been in my life since I was a little boy. And so I would say that. And then the second thing is I have a unique ability. And again, I attribute this 100% to the Lord, to see things finished before they're started. And so I often have a great idea of where we should go because I can see it in my mind, kind of like an interior decorator can come in your house and go, oh, that should be purple and that wall ought to be brown. It's like they can imagine it before it's as if it's done. And I can't do that with decorating, but I can do that with life. And especially when it comes to organizations and ministry, and I can meet somebody and, like Bethel School of Technology is a great example. I met Ryan Collins, who's now our CEO. And I'm like, this is it. This is the right guy. We have the vision, and it's not 100%. I have got, I'd say 3 or 4% of those wrong over the years. So it just humbles you enough to know that you have to still realize that you can be wrong. But I'm really good at that. I just want to say, like, I'm really good at that. And I'm really good at pushing through. And I do realize that when you build something from scratch, there's 2 or 3 years that you have to, it's not easy. Like you have to push in. It never goes the way you think it's going to go. It always costs more, takes longer, and you're always needing another person that you don't have. And that's just after building, 15 organizations, like those are common. But I realize like the right person will come along. The money will come if you do it right. If you love people and serve people well, you'll grow, and you just have to hang on during those tough times, because most people give up, I think, a year or two before they actually have success because they lack the vision and they lack perseverance.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I would say that's true of you, and probably definitely one of your strongest attributes, your ability to persevere. Doesn't really matter what's going on. It's not a factor for you. You're going to just keep going until either God says stop, mom comes in and says you're done, or or you've accomplished yeah, or you've accomplished the task at hand, which is always it's just so great. When it comes to life, when you look back, this phrase, if I only knew blank when I was young, what would you tell yourself looking back? And it could be any age, it could be when you're growing up or when you're just newlywed, or.
Jay, I'm sure I was ADHD when I was young. And I'm
Yeah.
sure I was still extremely ADD all the way into my early 40s.
Hmm.
And so I think I should have gotten help. And I also think that the outworking of the destructive part of it is that I have a really hard time paying attention. And so I'm not present a lot. And I really worked on it the last couple years, but I still notice there's a long ways to go, because I look around at men like you and other people in my life that I work daily with, and I'm like, oh, I feel like they're present, they're listening, they're connected. And I sometimes, and my mother was very emotionally intelligent, so she taught me the outworkings of looking connected. But I learned those without actually learning how to be connected.
Mm.
So I could sit there while you're talking, and I know I'm supposed to look you in the eye, smile, shake my head, and go, yeah, that's good, that's good. And I unfortunately can do that by training that I had since I was a little kid, because my mom was so good at it, and be thinking about something completely different and walk away and not even know what you said. So, I would say that I regret not getting help, and I regret, especially with my kids, and then I regret, and I regret not learning even later on in life how to be present.
Mm.
And I still am working on it. Like, I probably got an F through most of my life, and now I probably get a C. It's like there's no way I've mastered it. I notice with my grandkids, especially my young ones, I'm like, oh, I'm so bored. I get bored so quick. I get bored as fast as my 2-year-old. In fact, I'm like, she'll sit on my lap for 20, maybe 2 minutes. That's a long. And she'll be like, and I'm like, and we're totally connected. And then she'll be like, oh, off to something else. And I'm like, that is so crazy. That is about how long my attention span is. So,
Yeah.
all of those things, I think I should have had some help with. And I just, now my habits are bad. Now I have bad habits. And so, the last 2.5, 3 years, I've been working on my habits. Stay connected. Even if you're bored, it's not all about you. Life's not all about you. It's, it doesn't matter that, your granddaughter wants to read a book and you don't want to read a book because that book's not interesting to you. But it's not about you. Life isn't all about you being entertained and you being excited. This is not all about you. So, I'm doing so much better, but I'm definitely not, I'm nobody's hero in those areas,
Yeah. I think sometimes I think like, what we've learned in modern day school, and I'm not going to go too far down this road,
Yeah.
Having to sit at a desk and learn and write and not move all day long. And, and you get lunchtime, you get an hour to get out and run around. That was a really tough way for me to learn as well. And I actually thought with school, I used to feel like school was unfair and, that I wasn't good at learning. I actually thought that I didn't know how to learn until I got out of school and realized I actually have a good mind and I enjoy learning. I just don't enjoy learning that way, having to sit still and cause man, I wanted to run around. I wanted to be in the woods. I wanted to whittle on a stick and
Yeah, I'm a kinetic learner also. And what happened to me in school is I was very disruptive.
Yeah.
I was so bored. I was very disruptive. I was always playing a prank, always talking, which, that doesn't, what I'm saying? It was,
Yeah.
and again, it made my education worse instead of better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you didn't have much of a chance in school.
No.
So yeah, I get it. Yeah. I think the beautiful thing about being in my 40s, having kids over again,
Yeah,
is I get to look back where at 18, when I first started having kids, really 19, I felt the same way, you know, like it's so hard to sit down and just concentrate and rock a baby when I've got 9,000 things that I want to do and
So,
responsibilities and fears at 19 and 20, all the way really to 25, 26. You know, my last Evan, I had it at 24. So when they're two, it's just like, it's so much time doing stuff that you don't love to do. And so you have to focus on loving them a lot, right? Not loving the task a lot, but loving them a lot. And this time around, it's funny because I've hit my 40s and I honestly don't mind reading the books. I don't mind there's so much more satisfaction. I think for me too, there's so much more satisfaction in knowing that it doesn't last very long. So
well, you're a master at it, Jay. Like I come home from your house, which, you know, I'm over there, well, at least once a week. And I'm watching you with your little ones, and I'm like, I didn't do any of that. I didn't. Actually, I didn't do any of that.
That's the beautiful thing of being able to look back and go, oh, what do I wish I would have done better, right?
Slowly,
so when I'm 38 and I had Edie, I'm like, man, these years they don't stay very long, and so get some books that I enjoy reading. That's my trick, is like get the books that you like to read and read those and tell her stories that I like to tell. And, you know, I love making her happy.
Oh yeah. She's so bonded to you.
Yeah. It's pretty addicting.
Not to me. Like she'd come sit with me and then she's like, Grandma. And I'm like, I remind myself that I'm really good when kids get to be about 5 and 6. I'm like, I become their favorite. So I'm like, you're just 3 years from really bonding to me, you know?
Yeah, it's true. Well,
it's kind of true. Not totally. Kind of true. Yeah.
Yeah. We all have our sweet spot.
Yeah, we do.
When it comes to raising kids, and I know you talked about being being attentive or whatever. What do you feel like was one of the most important things that you did in raising kids?
Well, our kids grew up in a loving home, and they always knew they were loved.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't grow up in a yelling and screaming crazy house. They weren't raised by wolves, and they watched their parents love God well. And so I feel like, some of our parenting ways and discipline could have been different. But as far as, them getting a fair shake and them having an opportunity to prosper, and they were always believed in. And our home was a lot of fun. We always had fun. We were always, and Mom was always baking cookies and making sure the kids had everything they wanted to eat. And I was always clowning around with the kids and, doing stuff with them and going to their games and, being their coaches. And, it's like, it's hard to imagine us being as busy as we were and still being so connected. So I think those things were cool. And, we wanted our house to be the house where other kids wanted to come. And so, we always had a pool, even though we didn't have any money. We always had sweets and food and, laughter. And so our house often was the center of the social life of our kids. And I still feel like that is still a big part of who Kathy and I are, because I'm like, if you came over my house, you'd understand. Like, we have a huge house that we don't need. And it's not because we're like, we'll show you how wealthy we are. It's nothing to do with that. I mean, we have kids' playground. We have a pool we hardly ever swim in. The kids swim in it all the time. We have a basketball court, a volleyball court, a pickleball court, a badminton court, ping pong table, and that's used all the time by our kids. So I think that, just loving people well and wanting to be people that are fun to be with and fun to be around is part of what we did well at, not perfectly, well at, you know?
Yeah. You guys, there's no perfect parents. They don't exist, guys. So, if you got some shame around maybe some mistakes you've made as a parent, welcome to the club. We all got a little bit of regret, things we wish we could have done different. But what you guys did super well, looking back, was you were always available, always. Yeah. And like you said, at the soccer games, at the baseball games, for a conversation, for a hard conversation. And then when I was young, I think a lot of what went a long way with me is, your mom especially was really an affectionate person, that Spanish side. And so, and that really carried over to you and mom. You guys were always really affectionate with a hug or a kiss. And then you shared your emotions a lot with telling us, you used to tell me almost every day, like, you're special. And I remembered that, like, it actually meant something to me. And then, you guys were really good at letting us make mistakes.
Yeah.
Which is super hard as a parent, right? Because it can be scary when your kids make mistakes. But I remember being 15 and you telling me, son, you're almost out of the house. You got a couple years left here. Make all the mistakes that you can while you're here, because you have me here. Yeah. And that was now looking back, I teach that a lot, but that was such a incredible place to grow up, because kids who lie are kids who probably are lying because their parents can't handle the truth. Yeah. They have to lie because they're going to get in trouble, or, but I think we all did pretty good as kids, because we didn't have to lie. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to go somewhere else to be ourselves and to have fun. We knew that we were accepted. You guys did a great job apologizing too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you did a great job apologizing.
Mom didn't do anything to apologize for.
Mom never did anything that she had to apologize for. So just to be super clear, mom and dad didn't have a hard day because of mom, not dad.
Yeah, it's true.
It's 100% true. Yeah. Obviously dad's a great man. My mom, if you were to look up the word shalom, peace, it's just a picture of her. She's just an incredible woman. So
incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. When you're thinking about young guys my age, Dad, what's a piece of advice that you'd give to them? We're going to wrap up here, but just in life, a lot of guys my age we're in the phase of life where we're building stuff. A lot of the stuff we're building is early days. It's kind of our own. We got families, full blown, neck deep into little kids and teenagers, that stuff. Got a few failures under our belt, got a couple successes. What would be a piece of advice you'd give?
We weren't built to do this alone. And so I would say, one of the reasons why I have been successful at whatever level I'm successful is the people that I've attracted around me and the environment in which they have full freedom to tell me what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. And I can't even tell you how many bad decisions have been avoided, because we just talked about some of the worst, but that have been avoided by asked for and not asked for advice by people who care and who have lots of experience. And I think that being in an environment and creating an environment where people can tell you what they're thinking without being punished is so important. And it was heightened when I lost our business, because my two business mentors both did not want me to do what I did as far as buy the business or start the business. And so, that I look back and I think, well, if I would have just listened to them, I wouldn't have lost everything. Only God, I might still, be at Bethel and have a couple of auto parts stores that are, running without me, because they were running without me before, So I think that having accountability, and I'll say this, a lot of guys go, "Oh, I got Joe, he's my friend." Well, you don't need a ding dong to be accountable to. You don't need someone who's got it worse off than you do, which is usually like, like our motto for finding a mentor is like misery loves company. And I'm like, oh no, you got to find people that are strong where you're weak, and, that can speak to you wisdom when you even don't want to hear it. And I think that when you get really good at it, people tell you things that you didn't ask for. Like, I think when you really have a healthy environment with other guys, that your guys, it can be your wife too. It is your wife also. But, your guys will go, hey, dude, I was watching the way you're treating your son yesterday, and are you open to a conversation about that? And you're like, I didn't ask for advice. Yeah, because you didn't know you needed it. But
so true.
Other people like that love you, that feel connected to you and bonded to you and know that you trust them, they'll give you advice that you weren't asking for, but you're so glad they gave it to you. I'm not talking about Joe down the street that hates you, or somebody on social media who wants to tell you how to live life, or, your mother-in-law who, would love for you just to tell you how to lead your life. I'm talking about guys that you run with and people that you trust, that don't have to wait for you to say, hey, you got any advice for me? When actually you should have got advice like 4 months ago. I think that creating those kind of cultures where wise people hang with you, and they're not always right. And by the way, I get advice. I have this kind of environment, and I get advice, like at least monthly, that is not great advice, but they didn't understand the whole circumstance or whatever.
Yeah.
But I am so thankful that they felt the courage to tell me what they thought was good advice. So I don't want to chase that off in the name of, because the next time they see something, they might be absolutely right. So I think discipleship, mentoring, fathering, there's so many different words for some of the similar kind of relationships are super important.
Yeah, I agree so much. When I look at your life, I just see all the different areas that other men poured into you, and their strength that has just even in ideas or even in inspiration. Some of the guys that have helped to mold your life, they didn't necessarily even give you advice. You just watch them and you come back inspired, and it helps you grow. But really you have given our family such a beautiful gift in the men that you've brought in, in the relationships that you've brought in. And that's been such a fun model for me to be able to model my life after that as well, and pull guys who know what they're doing. Man, it just makes such a big difference when you get an expert in your corner who's not afraid of you and they have a heart for you. How that guidance just changes everything about your life. And it's what I love about what we're doing at BraveCo, is being able to pull guys from all over the place that have strengths that are different from one another, and to really connect those guys. So yeah, I love it. Dad, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for
you're such a
me.
blessing to all of us. And I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, I love what we're doing here at BraveCo, and it's a great plug for BraveCo. I wasn't thinking of it that way, but it's like, that's actually, we actually built the whole ministry around this idea of, filling your life with other people. So
it's so true.
It was a good shameless plug because I didn't think about it, but it was great. I love you, Jay.
Proud of you too, Dad. Thank you so much for sharing your life with us.
Yeah. Talk to you later.
All right. See ya. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.